Hello, critical thinking classroom. How are you? Are you ready to put on our thinking caps? If you didn't know what that was, right? A thinking cap. And, look it up. Not that you don't know or can't figure out what a thinking cap might be, but you might want to know, what's the root of that? Like, we found out in our Bookless classroom that the roots of our democracy are in the separatist pilgrim movement, in our religious movement. Oh my gosh. How fantastic is that? Bookless classroom. It ended up being 3 parts today, and it might end up being different parts. I've already dropped 272 frames. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time today with my connection, Xfinity, and the gremlins that are all over here, destroying our internet with all of your million algorithms that you have to pick up and not give any credence to the fact that I need to be online trying to make a living over here, as everyone is in these tough times. And so that brings me, nice segue, into our self-talk. And that's where we left off. Although, you know what? I didn't grab my Alley book. So I got to go upstairs and get my Alley Brosh book. So give me a second. And I will be right back. Because we need her book to talk about anything. Hold on. Never mind. It's right there. Did you see it? Right there? Right there. Oh, look at my pointing is getting better as well. There it is. Hyperbole and a half. And I got to be careful so it doesn't fall. If it falls over, it falls into my flowers and then it knocks over my vase and water everywhere. So let me get this out carefully. Okay, no problemo. That means no Spanish. No problem in Spanish. En español. En español means in Spanish. No problema en español. No problem in Spanish. Okay, so I won't be right back because I'm here. So I want to go to our. I want to read the rest of. I will read the rest of Depression Part 1. And then we're going to go into Depression Part 2. Where does that start? Oh, coming up. Yeah. So I think, we're going to, we're going to finish off Depression Part 1, and then we're going to see what we're going to do next. All right. I want to get to the slides because I know you're getting the idea already about what self-talk is, right? So that was our title for our last yesterday. We were talking about self-talk more specifically, and we are still continuing that because I'm sure that it is a treat to hear somebody else experiencing the same things that you have experienced and in this humorous way. So this is like a warm hug to all those people who thought nobody else was like them. This is like a great big warm hug. Okay, so I put on some clothes, put the movie in my backpack, and biked to the video store. It was the slowest, most resentful bike ride ever. Most resentful, right? If you remember that Allie lost all of her feelings, but it was more important that she returned the Jumanji, or no, it was more important that she returned the video because it was now stacking up that she wanted to see Jumanji and not have to pay so many things. That was a bigger priority than her apathy, than her, I don't care about the video, right? So it began her feelings about the price that she had to pay for the past 2 videos, along with the fact that she wanted to see Jumanji, was now becoming a bigger priority than her apathy, her feelings that I don't care. All right? And when I arrived, I found out that they didn't even have Jumanji in. Just as I was debating whether I should settle on a movie that wasn't Jumanji or go home and stare in abject silence, I noticed a woman looking at me weirdly from a couple rows over. She was probably looking at me that way because she was probably looking at me that way because I looked really, really depressed and I was dressed like an Eskimo vagrant. Normally, I would have felt an instant crushing sense of self-consciousness, but instead, I felt nothing. I've always wanted not to give an F. While crying helplessly into my pillow for no good reason, I would often fantasize that maybe someday I could be one of those stoic badasses whose emotions are mostly comprised of rock music and not being afraid of things. And finally, after a long time of feelings and anxiety and more feelings, I didn't have any feelings left. I had spent my last feeling being disappointed that I couldn't rent Jumanji. I felt invincible. Judge me all you want, stupid face. I don't have feelings anymore. And thus began a tiny rebellion. I can do anything. Maybe I'll rent a horror movie. Maybe I'll rent 6 horror movies. I would like to rent all of these movies and also purchase all of these Skittles. How entertaining. Having a party, eh? Nope. Hey, do you think you could load me up? Thanks. Then I swooped out of there like Batman and biked home in a blaze of defiant glory. Who knows? Maybe I'll touch a spider later. And that's how my depression got so horrible that it actually broke through to the other side and became a sort of fear-proof exoskeleton. Exo is on the outside, so a skeleton on the outside, right? Came to be sort of a fear-proof exoskeleton. Okay. Nothing can do anything to me. And I bet a lot of people have felt that way, right? If I can just get rid of my emotions, I wouldn't be hurt by that breakup. If I could just get rid of my emotions, I wouldn't be hurt by what my best friend just said to me. If I could get rid of my emotions, I wouldn't be so disappointed in what my parents have done or didn't do for me, right? If I could get rid of my emotions, my teacher could say anything in the world to embarrass me, and I wouldn't be embarrassed, and I wouldn't have any shame or guilt about it later on if I could just get rid of my emotions, right? And right now, also, we really do have a country that is focused on doing exactly that. A system, let's call it a system. We have a system that's really focused on doing exactly that. You know, we have a fascist movement. The white supremacist movement is all about getting rid of your emotions. Why? Because they are a hang-up. They're a weakness, according to that movement. So that movement is about getting rid of your emotions. The universities are about getting rid of your emotions. Why? Because they are an atheist movement. For the most part, they're an atheist movement. Not everybody, but you got to start standing up, university, because we have failed as scientists to study what is truly motivating about us, and that should be an embarrassment to the university across the board. But apparently it's not, and the reason why it's not is because, let me tell you something. Universities used to be called colleges. Remember that? Remember? Hillsdale College still is. Do you want to know why? The difference is, used to be Grand Rapids Junior College here in Michigan. Used to be Hope College here in Michigan. Used to be Calvin College here in Michigan. Now it's not. You want to know why? government funding. Government funded, if you were government funded, you called yourself a university. And now what do we have? We have Hillsdale. From what my understanding is, we have Hillsdale College. It's the only one school in the United States, here in Michigan, that does not take government funding. And so this is, and the government funding is moving in the direction, or the whatever they want. Medicine, it's basically medicine is what it is, right? Government funding is funded. How are they funding the universities? They're funding the universities to be so STEM heavy, like we've talked about before: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So nursing schools, right? And all the nurses in all the schools over here, from Oakland Community College to Oakland University to Rochester University. All of the universities have got this major medical program, and engineering programs, right? And forgetting about, what makes a human being, right? What makes us human? What makes life worth living for all of us, right? From our last discussion, working towards a whole. That's what our democracy was based on. Watch my last Bookless classroom where I read the Mayflower Compact. Our democracy was based on freedom of religion. That's what democracy was based on. So listen or read or find out about that Mayflower Compact, because our Constitution was based on the Mayflower Compact. They did separate church and state, though, right? It did separate church and state for us. So this is an interesting thing. Democracy was based on freedom of religion, but the Constitution separates church and state. Okay? Now, what does that have to do with our critical thinking class and our class that we have here today? So we're talking about this depression that is coming on. The answer to this depression that's coming on for Allie is to get rid of her emotions, right? But really, that is the motivator for things like justice, for example. Our emotions are the motivators for things like that. Okay, so when we get rid of them, we don't care about injustices, right? We don't care about injustices. And Allie says something in that book. I think she might have said it twice. Why does this always happen to me, right? If we really want, to function, we can't get rid of our emotions. What are our emotions for? They are for the injustices of why does this always happen to me, right? And helps us actually see some answers to that question. Like, number one, it's not only you, right? It's not only you. And in fact, that kind of is a little bit of a self-centered kind of way of looking at it. But Allie says that, right? What does she say her issues are? In the identity, which we've read from too. So the last 3 days we spent reading from Allie's book, Hyperbole and a Half, right? All right. Where she's finding out, well, we know, right? Going through the dark side and going through the dark side, through to the dark side in identity part number 2, that is what made Allie healthy. So what does she say? Some of the words that she uses is, and finally, after a lifetime of feelings and anxiety and more feelings, I didn't have any feelings left. I spent my last feeling being disappointed. I felt invincible. Where does she say? And that's how my depression got so horrible that it actually broke through to the other side and became a sort of fear-proof exoskeleton. Now, this is her coming through her depression. She says, it got so bad that I broke through to the other side. Those words are so filled with wisdom. It's just incredible to me as a psychologist, the insight that Allie really has here, because you can't go around it. Allie was trying to go around it in every single way. She was trying to go around her feelings in every single way. And now, yes, she's calling it the worst of her depression, right? But what she's doing, of course, it's going to be the worst of your depression or whatever. But what she's doing all by herself, by the way, all by herself from her story. She's not saying other people are helping her. She's not looking at her sister or even her dogs, right? So it looks to me like Allie is doing this all by herself, breaking through to the other side. So great wisdom. You cannot go around it. There's something that makes you need to break through to the other side. And then she talks about the anger that she feels and the darkness that she feels. But in the darkness, then identity part number 2 is where she breaks through and she faces herself. I just have never found anything that on the pages of that unfold through the course of a few stories, anything so profoundly, I'm going to use big words, that profoundly exemplifies. There is no better example. I've never found a better example of how to see somebody literally in a few short chapters break through to the other side. And most of that book is pictures, just like most people like. So it's a pretty thick book that's broken up into that many chapters. You can see the colors, right? So it seems like there's not that many chapters in there. It really aren't. So a lot of pages per chapter since it's a pretty thick book, right? But mostly, as you can see, mostly pictures. So such an easy read, and I have never seen a book ever that just comes to the point so quickly about how to deal, and like it's like real time. You're seeing it unfold in real time for Allie. And every choice, even that neighbor, going to that neighbor's house, oh dear Jesus, God Almighty. I just can't even imagine what your mother would have just exactly what you said. No other explanation. Pedophile. Oh dear God. Okay. All right. So look at the website. The website is posted below. It is fully entertaining. It's way more entertaining than I am, but at least I get to talk about it from a scientific perspective. So Allie, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for not villainizing your mom so much too. I'm sure she appreciates that. Okay. So let's get back to the main theme here of what we're talking about. So we're talking about self-talk. I'm not to be right back right now. We're talking about self-talk. So we saw Allie having a bunch of examples of self-talk. And now what we need to do is, if you remember, we were talking about the learned helplessness, right? So we were talking about learned helplessness and how we got the dogs to learn helplessness, how we got basically the monkeys to learn helplessness, right? Through social deprivation is what they call that. Social deprivation. And social deprivation is exactly what we had during COVID. I'm being deprived of social relationships. So big, term, social deprivation. All that means is, as in the monkeys, right? I'm being deprived of social relationships. So that teaches me learned helplessness, right? Clinging behaviors, biting behaviors, inappropriate sexual behaviors, all from social isolation. So what is the thing that Allie is doing here that is is unhealthy, socially isolating, but not a bad thing to do if what you want to do is throw sand in kids' faces, right? Not a bad thing to do if somebody asks you to borrow the chairs and you look at them like, look at them enjoying those chairs, right? So maybe sometimes social isolation might benefit you if that's what you feel like doing, if you can't control your behavior, right? And Allie slowly learns how to control her behavior. And in part, she learns how to do that through her self-talk. That and going to dark places that you might not want to go to. Allie, as I've said, and this is the most important thing, one of the most important things is that Allie doesn't say she's spending a lifetime there. She just went there. She didn't want to go there. What did she realize? What she realized in an instant, in almost an instant, that the truth would be different. She thought that the truth would be different. And she noticed that almost in an instant. Just like in an instant, she broke through. And just like in an instant, in the next chapter on depression, she breaks through in an instant. In an instant. Stupid tiny piece of corn is now the funniest thing in universe. Nothing is funnier than dumb little piece of corn. This is where Allie breaks through. In an instant, she breaks through. What does that mean? What does that mean? Here she is struggling. She needs to go, I'm saying she needs to go through something. She can't go around it. Every example in here is showing how she's trying to go around it until she goes through the darkness. And she's there in an instant. And it's gone in an instant. What does that mean? What does it mean? Well, in the critical thinking classroom, it's like, thank God, I can actually literally turn my depression around in an instant. And that's true. Scientifically, we call that a paradigm shift, right? It is true that you can turn it around. And 3 different ways Allie demonstrates examples of how about how she made a paradigm shift. Every story in here is about how Allie made a paradigm shift, honestly. So how her thinking changed. But your thinking changes most often in an instant. So do you have to take the steps? Yes, you do. From a spiritual perspective, it's Joshua taking the army around the walls of Jericho. There is something he had to do. He had to do it. Was it a hard thing to do? No, it wasn't a hard thing to do. We think it's going to be hard. We think that God is asking us to do a very hard thing, but he's not. And it changes in an instant. In an instant, the walls came tumbling down. After 7 days of walking around that and then blowing your horns, the walls will come tumbling down. Is that so hard, Joshua, in your army? No, it's not, and we're going to do it. How about the guy who is washing himself, who is told to go wash in the Jordan River 7 times in the Jordan River? Wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Why would I do that? It's a filthy, disgusting river. And I came to you, Jesus of Nazareth, wizard of, and I don't want to call Jesus a wizard, but basically you could work this magic. Why do I have to go to the Jordan River? Why would I have to do something so ridiculously simple? You can't be the magic man I thought that you were. Go do it. His servant tells him to go do it, and he does it. And what happens? He's cured of leprosy. The job that we're asked to do isn't hard. It's one of faith, is the job that we're asked. We're asked to do a job of faith, is what we're asked to do. right? You're asked to walk around the walls of Jericho 7 times and blow your horn after each time. That's what you're supposed to do. You need to go wash in the Jordan River 7 times. 7 times, right? Right? Perfect number. No, perfect is 3. 7 is, I think 7 is Jesus. I think 7 is Jesus. 6 is Satan. 7 is Jesus. I think. I'm pretty sure. Okay, but that's spiritual classroom stuff, but we have to get it in here because here's the thing about it. A paradigm shift really is grace. So what are you supposed to do for it? Well, join me in the spiritual classroom. We can help a little bit more with that, a little bit more. I just told you, go around the building 7 times. Toot your horn after each day, right? 7 days, 7 times. And on the 7th day, the walls will come down. And that's how you do it. Well, what does that mean? Well, I don't know. I do know Allie's a great example of going through something, and you have to go through it. You have to go through the 7 days of going around the building. It's not hard to go through it, but you have to go through it, right? And it's scary. And it's scary. It feels like darkness. It feels like, well, this isn't the darkness one, but this is the darkness one that she talks about, going through the darkness. But the darkness pictures are on this other one here on Depression Part 2, where she is actually sort of going through it in real time. So here, the darkness pictures there of the things that she's going through in real time. Here, this is in Depression Part 2. So she's doing it in real time. And then in her Identity Part 2, she's really revealing what she saw, which was the truth. Her truth that she needed, the truth that she needed. It's just, I can't even say enough about it. Look at this. Look at the darkness. This is part of Depression Part 2. This is Depression Part 2. So just her. There's Depression Part 2. Her going through the darkness. So no feelings, no feelings, no feelings. No feelings, and then through the darkness. And there's nothing in the darkness. But here, in Identity Part 2, is where she learns what's in the darkness. It's just... it's just like a cartoon book. And it's such great literature. It's actually literature. How could that be? A cartoon book is actually literature. It is. It is. All right, my frames are dropping a mile a minute over here, so I don't know if I'm going to end up like that. So I'm sorry if that's the case, but let's get going here. So all of that is laying the groundwork for me to be able to give you examples of these, now using scientific terms in positive psychology from Christopher Peterson, explanatory styles. And again, they're called explanatory styles because it's about how you explain bad events. I say again because we talked about this in class number 22, I believe it was. A little bit about this in class number 22. So, explanatory styles. How do we explain bad events? We could say how you explain good events, and what you would end up doing is just turning all of those statements into the opposite of what they are that you see right there. All right. So if I were to explain a good event in ways that were on the bottom, external, stable, and global, then I would be using a pessimistic explanatory an optimistic explanatory style, because I would be explaining a good event. No, that would be a good event as being the opposite. So a good event as being internal, stable, and global. Right, exactly. Like I said, that would be then an optimistic explanatory style as opposed to a pessimistic explanatory style. So you would reverse those. If you were explaining a bad event, that an internal, stable, and global explanation of that event would be a pessimistic explanatory style. An external, unstable, and specific way that you explain that bad event would be an optimistic explanatory style. If it was a good event, it would be exactly the opposite. All right, so that if I were explaining a good event, internal, stable, and global would be an optimistic explanatory style. External, unstable, and specific would be a pessimistic explanatory style. Now, what does that mean? What does all that mean? Okay, so let's start with the very first one, which is an internal explanatory style. Now, I mentioned some of this on day number 22, but not in the detail that I'm going to go in with it right now. All right, so how do I explain? And we're going to use bad events. We don't want to get confused by going to good events. Just know that we can explain good events, but for now, we've got a lot to learn. Our example is going to be explaining bad events because that was the first measure that Seligman and Peterson looked at, was explaining bad events, okay? And then develop their theory based on bad events. So that's what we're going to look at. So how do you explain bad events? Do you say that it is due to you? Is it due to you? Or is it due to something in the environment? Now, this is the most interesting of the three explanatory styles, the three variables that we use to learn whether or not you're an optimist or a pessimist. Explanatory style is your self-talk. How do you explain events? Your self-talk. According to Allie, how did she explain bad events? She explained bad events as being outside of her control. Outside of her control. She could not control. Why does this always happen to me? Bad events, Allie perceived as being outside of her control. That would be a pessimistic explanatory style. So let's take a look at that. All right. So she's got the geese that are coming into her home, right? And a pessimistic explanatory style would be people who view a negative event as their own fault. How do you explain a bad event? So she had the goose come into her kitchen and she says, why does this always happen to me? There's something about me that makes this happen, as opposed to there's something about, I don't know, maybe the goose wanted to come in to get warmed up, right? Maybe the house was warm. Maybe the goose smelled something that was cooking, right? So it wasn't because of you, Allie, that you always have bad luck, and that's the reason why this happened to you. So Allie was making an internal explanation for the bad event. A goose comes into the kitchen. Why does this always happen to me? It must be something about me that makes these things happen. All right, so Allie is starting the very foundation of a pessimistic explanatory style. How does she explain bad events? In a pessimistic kind of way. All right? So, goose comes into the kitchen. It's my fault. Why does this always happen to me? It's likely to happen again. She said, why does it always happen to me, is what she said, and undermining other aspects of their lives. It doesn't just happen to me in the kitchen, as she said. It happened to her when she was a little girl. Let's see if I could find that quickly. And I think I can. So here, when she was a little girl, she was feeding the geese, and what happened? The geese came charging at her, and she's like, I was just helping you. So it happens when she's feeding the geese It happens in her kitchen. Here it comes walking into her house. So it happens to me all the time, and it happens to me in all different kinds of circumstances. Look at all these circumstances that this happens to me in. So that is a wonderful example of a pessimistic explanatory style. If I were using an optimistic explanatory style, I would be saying that it is, as I said, due to the circumstance that it was cold outside, the door was wide open, and the duck probably or goose probably smelled the delicious food I was cooking. All of those things I can control. I can keep a goose out of my house if I keep the door closed. If I know that it might come charging in my house because it smells my food, right? So I'm more prepared. I can control those things. I can't control the luck that I have in number one there, right? The luck that I have in the pessimistic explanatory style. I can't control all the bad luck that I have because it always happens to me. But I can, in the second one, in the optimistic explanatory style, I can explain it and control it by, when I'm cooking, don't open up the door. Look for geese before I open up the door. They may be hiding behind something and trying to charge in my house. I don't know, right? Maybe they think you're the goose whisperer. Who even knows? You're really good with dogs, Allie. Maybe they think you're really good with geese as well. Who even knows what they're thinking, right? Okay, so when I say that this happened to external reasons, for external reasons, because the kitchen smell was so good, because it was very warm in there, right? Or who knows? Excuse me, who knows? Maybe the goose laid an egg in your house and she was looking for her baby. Who even knows? I don't know. I know Allie sometimes took babies. She took that cat. So who even knows? Maybe you took something from that goose. I don't know, Allie. Okay. If I have an optimistic explanatory style, it's going to happen in this one instance. Why? Because the door was open, left wide open, and it was warm in the house, and there was a great smell in the house. So it's not going to happen every time. There can be geese outside, and they're not going to attack me. They attacked me, Allie, in this situation. Why? Well, probably because Allie was little at the time. And she was feeding the geese and they wanted more geese. You want to know what happened to me one time when I was feeding horses carrots? They literally chased me down. Horses, Allie, not geese. Horses. Literally 2 horses. My dad had us feeding them. And I had a handful of carrots and they started wanting my carrots and I got scared. So I started running and horses, Allie, were chasing after me at about that same age. I was a little bit older than you were here. A little bit older, likely, than you were here. I was about 8. Yeah, so it happens. And it was horses. Did I say it was horses, Allie? It was horses. But why? Because I had carrots in my hands. And horses, I rode horses and trained with horses. Not a lot, but a little bit. Because I was scared of them. Because I almost got plowed over by horses. So I wasn't very good with horses because I was afraid of them. But they didn't do that to me ever again. Even though I did work with them a lot. Right? I was still scared of them, but I still worked with them a lot. Right? Not like a professional, like a scared person. I worked with them, but I did for 4-H and tried to get it in a show when I couldn't. And then my cousin had to take over because I was too afraid because of that incident, right? So it left me, emotionally scarred for a lifetime, but not really. I mean, the horses didn't trample me by some miracle. Who even knows? My nutso dad from Chicago is telling his little girls in the field who are 8, feed these giant beasts. He acted like he knew everything. Raised in Chicago, fought in gangs in Chicago. And then he acted like he knew about horses in the country because that's where we grew up. What were you running from, Dad? Something. Okay. So it will only happen in this situation. And then the last one is global or specific. So stable or unstable is time. Happens again and again and again. Global or specific is a situation or the event that it happens in. So I'm not only bad at math, I'm bad at reading. I'm also bad at athletics, and I'm also bad at music. I have a tin ear, right? So those are like fields or industries or talents, right? Stable is time, and global in every situation, or specific in only this situation, is events. It's based on situations or events. Stable or unstable is based on time. Does it happen time and time and time again? Global or specific, does it happen in all these different situations? Internal or external, is it due to me or is it due to something outside of myself? And the whole objective of this whole thing boils down to, how much control do I have? If I have no control, it's due to something inside of me, right? Due to something inside, like a personality characteristic that I can't change. As hard as I try, Caitlin Smith, as hard as I try, I can't change, right? How many people feel that way? Allie felt that way for sure. As hard as I try, I can't change. It's due to a personality fault of my own. If I could only work harder, had more diligence, was smarter, had, I could overcome. So that gives us a sense of helplessness, especially if I have no control over every situation anytime. Pick a day of the week. Doesn't even matter. Just pick a day of the week, do your beeper thing and text me and say, what are you doing? And I'd be like, big loser time, right? Because I see everything that way. I see everything as big loser time, and it's my fault for it as well. So Allie is heartbreaking as it is for me, has a pessimistic explanatory style, and it is clearly exemplified. Her book is a clear example of a pessimistic explanatory style. All right, so let's talk about, and I'm going to say it again. So what do? You change your self-talk. Now, if Allie changes her self-talk, she's probably not going to be able to write another book. So there you have it. There's another dilemma, Allie. If you change your self-talk, you probably won't be able to write another book. And one's coming out September of this year, so we expect that you're not going to use that changing of the self-talk until after your book is out. We hope, Allie. Even though we want you to be mentally better for sure, and we want you to feel like you have control over things in your life for sure. Okay. So let's look at some examples of different explanatory styles. All right. So here we've got we're going to start at the bottom. Because that's the one we started with before. Personalization. Is it my fault, internal, or is it the fault of something outside of my control, right? Or which means I can control. Is it internal to me, like a personality thing, which I can't control, or is it external to me, which a lot of times I can control? The top one there is permanence, which is stable or unstable, basically. All right. I gotta sneeze. Oh, sorry. That was a loud one. Hold on. I gotta sneeze again. Oh, and now I turned it off, and then I don't sneeze my second sneeze, and it's right there hanging. It's just hanging. So again, there on the right, it says, what are examples of optimistic and pessimistic explanatory styles? And so at the top there, what do we have? We've got permanent and temporary, which is permanent would be stable, temporary would be unstable. All right. And then in the middle there, it's pervasiveness. So personalization, permanence, and pervasiveness are terms that we use for those three different categories of options where we measure your optimism or pessimism. So I had a bad grade on my test. If I say I'll never get another good grade, that means I think that getting bad grades is stable, right? Or permanent. As opposed to an optimistic explanatory style would say, at least it was only one test, right? So unstable. An optimistic explanatory style is this bad event is only temporary. It doesn't happen all the time. It's unstable. Let's look at pervasiveness. We're going to go in this order. It doesn't even matter what order we go in, right? So what would I say if I was pessimistic and it happens in every event? Nothing in my life ever works out, right? And every single event and across all time, number one, stable, that's a pessimistic explanatory style, as opposed to it's specific to this event. Math class has been tough this year. This year, math class has been tough. Not every year, right? And it's math class. It's not art, it's not English class, it's not music class, it's math class. It's specific to this situation, as opposed to a pessimistic explanatory style says it happens in all, remember what I said, situations. Pervasiveness, universal or specific, focuses on how do you see situations. Does this bad stuff happen to you in every situation? When you're on vacation, Allie, and did the goose chase you? As well as when you're at your house, Allie, as well as when you're at your school, Allie. It happens in every situation, and it happened since I was a little kid, and it's still happening to me now as a grown adult in my own kitchen. See how that's a pessimistic explanatory style? That's permanent and universal. It happens in every situation, universal. It happens all the time, permanent. And in the last one, personalization, it is my fault if I have a pessimistic explanatory style. The bad event is my fault. I'm not smart enough to get a good grade. See how that's a personality characteristic? Our intellect is a personality characteristic. How smart I am. I can't change how smart I am. It's something that is permanent. It happens in all situations, and it's my fault because I'm not smart enough. And remember, we really can go back to, again, this whole idea that we've had about mastering something, right? Mastering something. If I feel a pessimistic explanatory style, I feel like it doesn't matter how hard I try, I am not going to master something and see that. So it is due to me. IQ is fixed and I'm not smart at the top there. And when we look at low performance level, I did poorly, a bad event. What happens? I become helpless. Why? It's due to me. It happens all the time. And it happens in every situation, which means that I do not have an incremental idea about my skills. It means that I don't feel like I could gain and get better slowly over time. It means that I don't believe that I can refine myself. I have no control over. Remember, we called that refining, that incremental learning in increments. We call that refining. We are slowly refining our skills. When I have a pessimistic explanatory style, it doesn't matter what I do because what I am is, as we said there, not smart, as opposed to somebody who thinks that it's external, which is my teacher should help me after school, right? So now here is an interesting thing, because what you end up doing in that external is you might blame somebody else. So here we have to really think hard about what our own self-talk is and how we can improve our own self-talk. Okay, I'm going to stop a little bit early because that was a lot of information I gave you. And I'm going to, and to explain this next part of it is going to take, no. You know what? I have another example. Then I'll quit. Here's another example of optimistic versus pessimistic explanatory style. So what do we have here? Let's see. Let me get my PowerPoint up here for me. So what do we have? We have, and now we've got across the top there, internal, external, stable, unstable, and global specific there. So are the terms that I mentioned the first time. So internal, external. My girlfriend broke up with me. That's the bad event. My girlfriend broke up with me because her parents forced her to. Something external to me, that's an optimistic perspective. Remember, we said that external point of view, when there is a bad event, an external point of view when there is a bad event is an optimistic explanatory style. So that's what we are looking at, right? Okay, so my girlfriend broke up with me because her parents made her. Internal would be my girlfriend broke up with me because I'm from a low-class family. I'm not going to college and I have very little ambition. Personality things, right? Things that I can't change. They are part of who I am. That's a pessimistic explanatory style, an internal perspective, right? It's all my fault that she broke up with me. Stable versus unstable, optimistic explanatory style. My girlfriend broke up with me because she needs all her time right now to devote to the charity drive, which only lasts 1 month. So it's not going to happen all the time. And maybe after a month, we can get back together. It is unstable. My girlfriend breaking up with me is unstable, and therefore it can change. My girlfriend broke up with me because I'm shorter than her and she wants someone who is taller. That's stable. That's something I can't change. How am I going to change my height? I can't change that. So if I can't change it, it's stable. My height is stable. That's pessimistic self-talk. As an explanation for why your girlfriend broke up with you. The last one, my girlfriend broke up with me because she found out I dated Julie last weekend. Oh, that's a specific circumstance. I dated Julie last weekend. I shouldn't have dated her. But as long as I don't date Julie or other people, then I can change it. It is specific to this situation. That's an optimistic explanatory style. It only happens when I date somebody else that people break up with me. As opposed to, my girlfriend broke up with me because I'm an inconsiderate, two-timing, unfaithful jerk who couldn't keep a relationship going if his life depended on it. That, again, it happens in every circumstance. Why? Because in all situations, I'm kind of a low-life jerk, right? Okay, so 2 great examples of bad events, and you could kind of practice on your own to learn and decide and think about explanatory styles that are optimistic or pessimistic based on a good event. And then go through that exercise. The more that you begin to get familiar and then stop and listen and write it down, maybe even keep a journal for a single week of all your self-talk. If you did that, you could easily change your self-talk in 21 days, easily 3 weeks, and change your pessimistic explanatory style to an optimistic one. For 1 week, you write down your self-talk that's going on in your head. 1 week, do that. And then for the next 2 weeks, you're going to work on changing it. Every time you catch yourself, you're going to hear yourself and you're going to change it. And we're going to talk about exactly how you change it. But again, you have some pretty good ideas now that you know about explanatory style. Internal, external, stable, unstable, global, specific. Okay. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am the teacher, and this is the Critical Thinking Classroom. Thanks for joining me so that we can learn a little bit more about really what makes us us, and then how might we make us better. Thanks for joining me.